Daniel Carter had always been a man who believed in fairness. As the CEO of SwiftFlow, a company known for its efficient delivery services, he prided himself on treating his employees well. But recently, rumors had reached him, rumors about one of his warehouses. Workers were allegedly being denied overtime pay, forced to work extra hours without compensation. It was something Daniel couldn't ignore. He knew that sending someone else to investigate wouldn't give him the full picture. If he wanted answers, he'd have to go undercover himself. After weeks of careful planning, Daniel transformed into Jack Monroe, a temp worker looking for honest labor. His suit was replaced with old jeans and a faded blue jacket. Gray dye streaked through his dark hair, making him look older than his 52 years. Even his posture changed. Instead of walking tall like a leader, he hunched slightly, mimicking the weariness of someone who'd spent decades doing manual labor. The morning air was crisp as Daniel drove to the warehouse. The building loomed ahead, surrounded by empty fields and chain-link fences topped with barbed wire. A large sign above the entrance read, "SwiftFlow Logistics, delivering excellence every day." Daniel parked his car far enough away to avoid suspicion and walked toward the main gate. His heart raced not just from nerves but also from excitement. This wasn't just about finding out the truth, it was about reconnecting with the people who made his company run. Inside, the warehouse buzzed with activity. Forklifts beeped as they moved back and forth carrying towering stacks of boxes. Conveyor belts whirred noisily, sorting packages bound for destinations across the country. The smell of cardboard and machine oil filled the air. Workers hurried around, their faces focused yet tired. Daniel felt a pang of guilt. How many of these people were struggling because of decisions made far above their heads? A young woman approached him almost immediately. She wore a bright yellow safety vest over her uniform and had a friendly smile that stood out amidst the grim surroundings. Her name tag read, Emily Dawson. "Hi there," she said cheerfully. "You must be the new guy." "I'm Emily. Welcome to SwiftFlow." Daniel nodded, trying to appear shy. "Thanks, I'm Jack," he replied, keeping his voice low and steady. "Just started today." "Well, don't worry too much," Emily assured him. "It's busy here, but we'll get you up to speed. Just try to stay on Richard's good side. He runs this place like a drill sergeant." At the mention of Richard, Daniel's ears perked up. "Richard? Is he the manager?" "Yeah," Emily said, lowering her voice slightly. "He can be tough, but he keeps things running smoothly. Just keep your head down and do what he says. Oh, and if you ever need anything, let me know. I've been here long enough to know how things work." Her kindness surprised Daniel. Despite her warm demeanor, there was an underlying weariness in her eyes, a heaviness that suggested she carried more burdens than she let on. He wondered if she was one of the workers affected by the unpaid overtime. Before he could ask, another voice cut through the noise. "Emily, stop chatting and get back to work." The sharp tone belonged to a tall, broad-shouldered man striding toward them. His name badge identified him as Richard Lane. He had a stern expression, his lips pressed into a thin line. His eyes scanned Daniel briefly before turning to Emily. "You've got shipments piling up," Richard snapped. "We're already behind schedule. Don't waste time babysitting the new guy." Emily gave Daniel a quick apologetic glance before hurrying off. Richard turned his attention to Daniel, sizing him up. "So you're the temp," Richard said gruffly. "Jack, right? Listen carefully. Around here we don't tolerate slackers. You show up on time, you follow orders, and you pull your weight. Got it?" Daniel nodded, forcing himself to remain calm under Richard's intense gaze. "Got it," he replied. Firmly. "Good. Now grab a scanner and start sorting those packages over there." Richard pointed to a section of the warehouse where several workers were already busy unloading trucks. Without waiting for a response, he turned and marched away, barking instructions at someone else. Daniel took a deep breath and headed to the designated area. As he picked up a handheld scanner, he noticed other workers glancing at him curiously. Some offered polite smiles, while others simply nodded in acknowledgement. One man, younger than the rest, leaned closer as Daniel began scanning barcodes. Hey, newbie, the man whispered. I'm Ryan. Word of advice, don't trust Richard, he's all bark and bite, no treat. Daniel chuckled softly, appreciating the humor. Thanks for the tip, he said quietly. What's the deal with him anyway? Ryan shrugged. Let's just say he doesn't play fair. Ask anyone here, they'll tell you the same thing, just watch your back, okay? Before Daniel could respond, Richard's voice echoed through the warehouse again, cutting short any further conversation. For now, Daniel focused on blending in, observing everything around him. Each interaction, each complaint, each sigh of frustration added pieces to the puzzle he was determined to solve. As the hours passed, Daniel grew more comfortable in his role. He worked alongside Emily and Ryan, learning the rhythm of the warehouse. By the end of the day, his muscles ached, and his hands were sore from handling countless packages. Yet despite the physical toll, he felt a strange sense of satisfaction. For the first time in years, he understood what it meant to truly earn a paycheck. Back in his car later that evening, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. The day had been exhausting, but it had also been enlightening. He now had a glimpse into the lives of his employees, the challenges they faced, the sacrifices they made. More importantly, he had planted the seeds of trust with Emily and Ryan. Little did they know their new co-worker was about to change everything for the better. By the second day, Daniel, or rather Jack, was starting to feel more like part of the team. He had learned how to use the scanners efficiently and could keep up with the fast pace of the warehouse. The other workers were beginning to warm up to him too. Emily still checked in occasionally, offering helpful tips or simply asking how he was settling in. Ryan, who seemed to enjoy cracking jokes, often made small talk during breaks. During lunch, the atmosphere shifted slightly. Workers gathered in small groups, eating quickly before heading back to their tasks. Some sat on wooden crates, others leaned against pallets stacked with boxes. The noise level dropped as people took a moment to rest, though the hum of machinery in the distance never fully disappeared. Daniel found himself sitting near Ryan, who pulled out a sandwich wrapped in crinkled paper. You're doing pretty well for a temp, Ryan said between bites. Most newbies take days to catch up. Thanks, Daniel replied, smiling modestly. I guess I've done this kind of work before, just not recently. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. Yeah, you seem different somehow. Like you've got experience but don't want to show it off. Daniel froze for a split second. Had Ryan figured him out? No, that couldn't be possible. He forced a laugh. Maybe I'm just trying to impress the boss. Ryan smirked. Good luck with that. Richard doesn't care about impressing anyone. As long as the numbers look good, he's happy. The mention of Richard sparked curiosity in Daniel. What do you mean? Ryan hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Lowering his voice, he continued. Look, I don't know how much you've heard, but Richard isn't exactly fair when it comes to overtime. People stay late all the time because we're so backed up, but their hours get cut short on the records. They say it's company policy, but come on. It's just Richard being cheap. Daniel's stomach churned. This was the first direct confirmation of the rumors he'd heard. Does anyone complain about it? He asked cautiously. Some try, Ryan admitted, shrugging. But nothing changes. HR ignores them, and Richard makes life harder for anyone who speaks up. So most people just deal with it. What choice do they have? Before Daniel could respond, Emily joined them, holding a thermos of coffee. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes hinting at sleepless nights. Hey guys, she said softly, taking a seat beside them. How's your second day going, Jack? Not bad, Daniel replied, giving her a reassuring smile. Still learning, though. Emily nodded. You'll get the hang of it. Just remember, don't let Richard push you around too much. If he gives you trouble, let me know. I'll try to help. Her words struck Daniel deeply. There was a protective tone in her voice, almost maternal. He wondered again if she was one of the workers affected by the unpaid overtime. Thanks, Emily. I appreciate it. She smiled faintly, but didn't say anything more. Instead, she sipped, her coffee staring off into the distance. Daniel noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands trembled slightly as she held the thermos. Whatever burden she carried, it weighed heavily on her. Later that afternoon, Daniel decided to test Ryan's claims. He lingered after his shift ended, pretending to reorganize some misplaced packages. Most of the workers had already left, leaving the warehouse eerily quiet. Only Richard remained, typing furiously on a computer at his desk near the entrance. From a distance, Daniel watched carefully. Richard glanced over his shoulder every few minutes, clearly uneasy about staying late. Finally, Daniel saw him open a program labeled Time Card Management. His fingers flew across the keyboard, altering entries here and there. It was subtle, just a few minutes shaved off each worker's recorded hours, but the impact would add up over weeks and months. Daniel's fists clenched involuntarily. Every keystroke felt like a betrayal, not just of the workers, but of the values he had built his company on. He wanted to march over and confront Richard right then and there, but he knew better. Without solid proof, he risked blowing his cover and losing the chance to expose the truth. Instead, he quietly slipped away, heading toward the employee locker room. Once inside, he leaned against the cool metal lockers, letting out a shaky breath. His mind raced with questions. How many employees had suffered because of Richard's greed? How much money had been stolen from hardworking people like Emily and Ryan? And most importantly, how could he stop it? The next morning, Daniel arrived early, determined to gather more evidence. As he clocked in, he noticed Emily already busy, organizing shipments. She looked even more exhausted than the day before, her movements slower and less precise. When she saw him, she managed a weak smile. "Morning, Jack," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You okay?" Daniel asked, genuinely concerned. "Yeah, just tired," she admitted. "Been working late a lot lately. Doesn't pay much though, does it?" Her comment confirmed what Daniel had suspected. "What do you mean?" Emily hesitated, glancing around to ensure no one was listening. "Let's just say my paycheck doesn't match the hours I put in. But what can I do? Complaining only makes things worse." Daniel felt a surge of anger, not at Emily, but at the system that allowed such injustice to thrive. "You shouldn't have to deal with that," he said firmly. "No one should." Emily gave him a sad smile. "It's not just me, Jack. Everyone here has stories like mine. We just survive, you know." Her words stayed with Daniel throughout the day. He worked alongside his co-workers, observing their interactions with Richard. Each command, each cold stare from the manager reinforced the toxic environment he had infiltrated. Yet, despite the challenges, Daniel found hope in the resilience of the workers. They supported each other, shared laughter during breaks, and found strength in unity. That evening, as Daniel drove home, he replayed the events of the past 2 days in his mind. He had seen enough to confirm the rumors, but exposing Richard wouldn't be easy. He needed concrete evidence, something undeniable. More importantly, he needed to protect the workers from retaliation once the truth came out. As he parked his car outside his house, Daniel realized something profound. Going undercover wasn't just about catching a corrupt manager. It was about reconnecting with the soul of his company. These workers weren't just names on a payroll. They were individuals with dreams, families, and struggles. And as their CEO, it was his responsibility to stand up for them. With renewed determination, Daniel stepped out of his car. Tomorrow, he would dig deeper. Tomorrow, he would find a way to bring justice to those who deserved it most. Daniel knew he was taking a risk. The more time he spent undercover, the closer he got to uncovering the truth, but the greater the danger of being caught. Still, he couldn't back down now. Not when so many workers depended on him to make things right. That evening, as the clock ticked past 7 p.m., most of the day shift workers had already left. Only a handful remained, finishing up their tasks or cleaning up the workspace. Daniel lingered near the loading dock, pretending to organize stray boxes. His heart pounded in his chest as he waited for the perfect moment to act. Richard Lane was still inside his office, seated at his desk. Through the partially open door, Daniel could see him typing furiously on his computer. The harsh glow of The monitor illuminated Richard's face, making him look even more intimidating than usual. Daniel knew this was his chance. If he could catch Richard tampering with the time cards, he'd have all the evidence he needed. Slipping into the shadows, Daniel crept closer to Richard's office. He stayed low, using stacks of crates and pallets as cover. When he was close enough, he pulled out his phone and activated the video recording feature. His hands trembled slightly, but he steadied himself, reminding himself why he was doing this, for Emily, Ryan, and everyone else who had been treated unfairly. Peering around the edge of a crate, Daniel zoomed in on Richard's computer screen. Sure enough, the program labeled Time Card Management was open. Richard scrolled through the entries, pausing occasionally to adjust numbers. Each keystroke erased hours of hard work, reducing overtime pay to nothing. It was infuriating to watch, but Daniel forced himself to stay calm. He needed to capture everything clearly. For several minutes, Daniel recorded silently, his eyes glued to the screen. Just as he thought he had enough footage, Richard suddenly stopped typing. He leaned back in his chair, stretching, and glanced toward the doorway. Daniel froze, ducking further behind the crates. Had Richard heard something? The next few seconds felt like an eternity. Richard stood up slowly, his gaze sweeping across the warehouse. Daniel held his breath, willing himself to blend into the shadows. Finally, Richard turned back to his desk, muttering something under his breath. Relieved, Daniel exhaled quietly and prepared to retreat. But as he shifted his weight, his foot accidentally knocked against a loose box. The faint clatter echoed through the silent warehouse. Richard's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing suspiciously. Without hesitation, he stepped out of his office, scanning the area. Daniel's mind raced. He couldn't run, not without drawing attention to himself. Instead, he stayed perfectly still, clutching his phone tightly. Richard moved closer, his footsteps echoing loudly on the concrete floor. Daniel's pulse quickened as the beam of Richard's flashlight swept past him. For a moment, it seemed like he might be discovered. Then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, Richard turned away, muttering about careless temps. As soon as he returned to his office, Daniel seized the opportunity to slip away. Heart pounding, he hurried toward the locker room, where he could finally breathe again. Once inside, Daniel leaned against the cold metal lockers, replaying the events in his mind. He had gotten what he needed. The video was clear proof of Richard's misconduct, but the close call left him shaken. One wrong move, and his entire plan could have fallen apart. The following morning, Daniel arrived early, determined to focus on gathering more information. As he clocked in, he noticed Emily already hard at work, her movement sluggish and her face pale. She looked even more exhausted than before, and Daniel couldn't help but feel responsible. Every minute she worked unpaid was another reminder of why he had to see this through. "Morning, Jack," she said weakly, offering a small smile. "You don't look so good," Daniel said, his tone gentle. "Are you sure you're okay?" Emily sighed, rubbing her temples. "I didn't sleep much last night, too much on my mind." Daniel hesitated, then decided to push a little further. "Is it money stuff? You mentioned your paycheck doesn't match your hours." Her eyes widened slightly and she glanced around nervously. "I shouldn't have said that," she whispered. "But yeah, it's tough. I've been working late almost every week, and it's not showing up on my check. I can't afford daycare anymore, let alone groceries. I don't know how much longer I can keep going like this." Her words hit Daniel like a punch to the gut. He wanted to tell her everything, to assure her that help was on the way, but he couldn't risk blowing his cover. Instead, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Hang in there, Emily. Things will get better, I promise." She gave him a grateful nod, though skepticism lingered in her eyes. "Thanks, Jack. I hope so." Later that afternoon, Daniel found himself working alongside Ryan. The younger man seemed unusually quiet, his usual jokes replaced by a somber expression. Sensing something was wrong, Daniel struck up a conversation during a brief lull in the workflow. "Everything all right, Ryan?" he asked casually. Ryan shrugged, avoiding eye contact. "Just tired, I guess. Been pulling doubles lately and it's not paying off like it should." Daniel nodded sympathetically. You mean because of the time card thing? Ryan's head shot up, his eyes narrowing. Who told you about that? No one, Daniel replied quickly. I've been watching, listening. It's pretty obvious something's not right around here. Ryan studied him for a moment, then sighed. Yeah, well, it sucks. Some of us try to report it, but HR doesn't care. They say it's company policy, but we all know it's just Richard covering his ass. Meanwhile, we're the ones struggling. Have you thought about going higher up? Daniel pressed. Like the CEO or something? Ryan laughed bitterly. Right, because the big boss actually cares about us grunts. Come on, Jack, be real. Guys like him live in fancy offices and drive luxury cars. They don't give a damn about people like us. Daniel flinched inwardly, knowing Ryan's words weren't entirely wrong. Many CEOs did disconnect themselves from the realities of their workforce. But Daniel was different, or at least he hoped he was. He vowed silently to prove Ryan wrong. As the day wore on, Daniel continued to observe Richard closely. He noticed patterns in the manager's behavior, the way he hovered over certain employees, the dismissive tone he used when addressing complaints, the smug satisfaction on his face whenever he adjusted someone's time card. Each detail fueled Daniel's determination to expose the truth. By the end of his shift, Daniel felt both drained and invigorated. He had gathered enough evidence to confront Richard and possibly even take the issue directly to corporate headquarters. But he knew the hardest part was yet to come. Confrontation wasn't easy, especially when facing someone as ruthless as Richard Lane. Driving home that evening, Daniel replayed the video footage on his phone. Watching Richard manipulate the time cards filled him with anger, but also resolve. Tomorrow he would take the first step toward justice. Tomorrow he would set things right, for Emily, for Ryan, and for everyone else who deserved fair treatment. With a deep breath, Daniel parked his car and headed inside. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready. Ready to fight for the values his company was supposed to stand for. The next morning, Daniel arrived at the warehouse earlier than usual. He had spent the night reviewing the video footage he'd recorded, ensuring it was clear enough to serve as undeniable proof of Richard Lane's misconduct. Now, armed with evidence and resolve, he prepared to confront the manager directly. It was a risky move, but Daniel knew he couldn't wait any longer. Every day Richard stayed in charge meant more stolen wages and suffering for the workers. As he entered the warehouse, Daniel noticed Emily already hard at work near the conveyor belt. Her shoulders sagged under the weight of another long shift, and her tired eyes reflected the stress she carried. She gave him a small wave when she saw him, but there was no energy behind her smile. Daniel felt a pang of guilt. If only he could tell her that help was coming soon. "Morning, Jack," Emily said softly. "You're here early?" "Yeah, I wanted to get a head start," Daniel replied, keeping his tone casual. "Figured I'd lend a hand where I can." She nodded gratefully, but didn't say anything more. Instead, she returned to her task, sorting packages with mechanical precision. Watching her reminded Daniel why he had gone undercover in the first place, to protect people like Emily from being exploited. Once most of the workers were occupied with their duties, Daniel made his way to Richard's office. The door was partially open, and Richard sat at his desk, sipping coffee while scrolling through emails on his computer. Taking a deep breath, Daniel knocked lightly on the door frame. Richard glanced up, irritation flashing across his face. "What do you want?" he snapped. "I just have a question about the time cards," Daniel began, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. His voice was calm, but his stance was deliberate, blocking the exit so Richard couldn't easily leave. Richard frowned, setting his mug down. "Time cards? Why are you asking about those?" "Well," Daniel continued, maintaining eye contact, "I've noticed some discrepancies. People working late shifts, but their hours aren't matching up with what they report. Thought maybe you could explain how the system works." Richard stiffened, his expression darkening. "Listen, Temp, don't go poking your nose into things you don't understand. The time card system is company policy. If anyone has issues, they should take it up with HR. Daniel took a step closer, his tone sharpening slightly. Funny thing about policies, they're supposed to protect employees, not cheat them. But that's exactly what's happening here, isn't it? Richard's jaw tightened, and he leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Careful what you're implying. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I think I do, Daniel said firmly. Pulling out his phone, he pressed play on the video footage he'd recorded the previous night. On the screen, Richard could be seen altering timecard entries, erasing hours of overtime pay. Daniel held the phone up so Richard could see it clearly. For a moment, Richard stared at the screen, his face pale. Then slowly he stood up, his hands clenched into fists. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "That doesn't matter," Daniel replied, his own voice steady. "What matters is that this proves what you've been doing, stealing from these workers, lying to the company, breaking the law." Richard's eyes darted around the room, searching for an escape. When he realized Daniel was blocking the door, his demeanor shifted. A smug grin spread across his face, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Who are you, really?" he asked, his tone mocking. "No temp worker would care this much about time cards." Daniel hesitated for a split second before making a decision. There was no point hiding anymore. With a deep breath, he straightened his posture and looked Richard squarely in the eye. "My name is Daniel Carter. I'm the CEO of SwiftFlow." Richard's smirk faltered, replaced by sheer panic. "What? No, that's impossible." "It's true," Daniel confirmed. "I came here undercover because I heard rumors about unethical practices at this warehouse. I didn't believe them. Not until I saw it with my own eyes. What you're doing is illegal, Richard, and it ends now." Richard stumbled backward, sinking into his chair. For a moment, he seemed speechless, his mind racing. Finally, he stammered. "Look, Mr. Carter, I can explain. It's not personal, it's just business. We've got quotas to meet, budgets to stick to. If we paid everyone their full overtime, we'd go over budget." "That's not your call to make," Daniel shot back, his voice rising slightly. "These workers put in honest effort every single day. They deserve to be compensated fairly. Your job is to manage them, not exploit them." Realizing denial wasn't going to save him, Richard tried a different tactic. "Okay, fine, maybe I messed up, but firing me won't fix everything. You'll lose morale among the staff. They'll resent you for letting this happen in the first place." Daniel shook his head. "That's where you're wrong. Firing you will send a message that SwiftFlow doesn't tolerate corruption. As for morale, I plan to repay every penny you stole from these workers, starting today." Richard slumped further into his chair, defeated. He opened his mouth as if to argue, but thought better of it. Instead, he muttered bitterly, "You'll regret this. Mark my words." "I doubt that," Daniel said coldly. "Security will escort you out shortly. Until then, stay here and don't touch anything." With that, Daniel turned and left the office, leaving Richard sitting alone in stunned silence. Outside, the warehouse buzzed with activity as usual. Workers moved crates, operated machinery, and sorted packages, unaware of the dramatic events unfolding behind closed doors. Daniel approached Emily and Ryan, who were taking a brief break near the loading dock. Both looked up, surprised to see him walking toward them with such purpose. "Everything okay, Jack?" Ryan asked cautiously. Daniel smiled, a genuine warm smile. "Better than okay. I need both of you to gather everyone in the break area. There's something important I need to say." Confused but intrigued, Emily and Ryan nodded and quickly spread the word. Within minutes, nearly all the workers had gathered in the designated space, murmuring curiously about what was happening. Richard remained absent, still locked in his office. When the crowd fell silent, Daniel stepped forward, standing tall and addressing the group. "Thank you all for coming. My real name is Daniel Carter, and I'm the CEO of SwiftFlow. I've been working here undercover for the past few days to investigate claims of unfair treatment." Gasps rippled through the crowd as workers exchanged shocked glances. Some looked skeptical, others hopeful. Daniel raised a hand to quiet them before continuing. What I discovered confirms what many of you already suspected. Richard Lane has been tampering with time cards to deny overtime payments. This behavior is unacceptable and effective immediately. He is terminated. Security is on its way to remove him from the premises. A murmur of approval swept through the room, punctuated by cheers from a few brave souls. Daniel waited patiently for the noise to die down before speaking again. But that's not all, he continued. Starting today, every hour of overtime worked will be reimbursed retroactively. We're also implementing new safeguards to ensure transparency in payroll processing. From now on, you'll receive weekly updates on your hours and earnings, so there's no room for manipulation. The workers erupted into applause, some even clapping Daniel on the back as they expressed their gratitude. Emily stepped forward, tears glistening in her eyes. Thank you, Mr. Daniel. This means so much to all of us. You deserve it, Daniel replied sincerely, and I promise this is just the beginning. SwiftFlow exists because of people like you. Without your hard work, none of this would be possible. As the meeting broke up, workers returned to their tasks with renewed energy and optimism. For the first time in months, laughter echoed through the warehouse, replacing the tension that had lingered for far too long. Later, that afternoon, Daniel watched as security escorted Richard out of the building. The former manager avoided eye contact, his head hung low in shame. Though relieved to see him gone, Daniel knew the fight wasn't over. Rebuilding trust would take time, but he was committed to making it happen. Driving home that evening, Daniel reflected on everything he had learned during his time undercover. He had gained more than just evidence of wrongdoing. He had gained a deeper understanding of the people who kept his company running, and he vowed never to forget it. The days following Richard Lane's dismissal were filled with change at the SwiftFlow warehouse. Daniel Carter remained on site, working closely with the employees to rebuild trust and implement new policies. He knew that simply firing Richard wasn't enough. He had to prove to the workers that he was committed to making lasting improvements. Each morning, Daniel joined the team during their shifts, lending a hand wherever needed. He loaded crates onto pallets, operated forklifts, and even helped sort packages when the conveyor belt backed up. His presence among the workers wasn't just symbolic, it was his way of showing solidarity. He wanted them to see him not as a distant CEO but as someone who understood their struggles. Emily Dawson noticed the difference immediately. For weeks she had been on the verge of quitting, unable to cope with the financial strain caused by unpaid overtime. But now, with the promise of reimbursement and fair treatment, she felt a renewed sense of hope. One afternoon, as she worked, alongside Daniel stacking boxes, she decided to speak her mind. Mr. Carter, she began hesitantly, I just want to say thank you. Really, what you've done means more than I can put into words. Daniel stopped what he was doing and turned to face her. Please, call me Daniel. And there's no need to thank me. This company wouldn't exist without people like you. You've earned every bit of respect and fairness. Emily smiled softly, though her voice trembled with emotion. It's not just about the money, it's knowing that someone actually cares. That's something I haven't felt in a long time. Her words struck a chord with Daniel. He realized how isolating leadership could be, especially when executives lost touch with their workforce. By going undercover, he had gained a perspective he never would have discovered otherwise. It wasn't just about fixing broken systems, it was about fostering genuine connections. Later that day, Daniel called a meeting in the break area to discuss the next steps. Workers gathered eagerly, their earlier skepticism replaced by cautious optimism. Emily and Ryan stood near the front, ready to support Daniel in any way they could. Thank you all for coming, Daniel began, his tone warm and sincere. I know the past few days have been overwhelming, but I want to assure you that this is only the beginning. We're going to make SwiftFlow a better place for everyone. He went on to outline specific changes. First, every worker affected by Richard's misconduct would receive a detailed breakdown of their unpaid overtime hours, along with a timeline for repayment. Second, A new digital system would be introduced to allow employees to track their hours in real time, eliminating the possibility of tampering. Finally, regular check-ins would be scheduled between management and staff to address concerns before they escalated. The room erupted in applause, with several workers stepping forward to shake Daniel's hand or express their gratitude. One older employee named Greg, who had been with the company for over 20 years, approached Daniel with tears in his eyes. "You have no idea what this means to us," Greg said, his voice thick with emotion. "We've been treated like cogs in a machine for so long. Now we finally feel like human beings again." Daniel nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. "That's exactly how it should be. No one should ever feel invisible or undervalued here." As the meeting wrapped up, Ryan pulled Daniel aside. "Hey, can I talk to you for a sec?" "Of course," Daniel replied, curious about what Ryan had to say. Ryan hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck. "Look, I'll admit, I didn't think you'd actually follow through. When you first told us you were the CEO, part of me thought it was just some PR stunt. But seeing everything you've done these past few days, well, let's just say I was wrong. You really do care." Daniel chuckled lightly. "I appreciate your honesty, Ryan. And I get why you doubt me. A lot of CEOs don't bother stepping out of their offices. But I'm not like that. I built this company because I believe in hard work and fairness. If those values aren't reflected in how we treat our employees, then we've failed." Ryan grinned. "Well, whatever your reasons, it's working. People are happier already. Just keep it up, okay?" "I will," Daniel promised. Over the next week, Daniel worked tirelessly to ensure the transition went smoothly. He personally oversaw the implementation of the new payroll system, double-checking each calculation to guarantee accuracy. He also met individually with key employees like Emily and Ryan, asking for their feedback on how to improve communication within the warehouse. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel found himself alone in the quiet warehouse. Most of the workers had gone home, leaving behind an eerie stillness. He wandered through the aisles, reflecting on everything he had learned during his time undercover. He thought about Emily's resilience, Ryan's humor, and Greg's loyalty. These weren't just employees. They were individuals with stories, dreams, and challenges. They deserved leaders who listened, who empathized, and who acted with integrity. Daniel vowed never to lose sight of that truth again. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps echoing behind him. Turning around, he saw Emily approaching, holding a small envelope. "Sorry to bother you," she said shyly. "I just wanted to give you this." Daniel took the envelope, opening it to find a handwritten note inside. It read, "Thank you for reminding us that we matter, for giving us a voice when no one else would listen. You've changed our lives forever." At the bottom, dozens of signatures filled the page, each one representing a worker whose faith in SwiftFlow had been restored. Touched beyond words, Daniel looked up at Emily. "This means more to me than you'll ever know," she smiled warmly. "We couldn't have done it without you." As Emily walked away, Daniel folded the note carefully and tucked it into his pocket. It was a reminder of why he had started this journey, and why it was far from over. Though Richard Lane had been removed, the real challenge lay ahead, ensuring that SwiftFlow became a model of ethical leadership and employee care. Driving home that night, Daniel felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had uncovered corruption, exposed injustice, and taken meaningful action to right the wrongs. But more importantly, he had reconnected with the heart of his company, the people who made it tick. And for the first time in years, he felt truly proud to be its leader. Weeks passed, and the changes Daniel Carter implemented at the SwiftFlow warehouse began to take root. The atmosphere transformed from one of tension and mistrust to one of collaboration and optimism. Workers no longer feared retaliation for speaking up. Instead, they felt empowered to share their ideas and concerns. Morale soared, productivity increased, and the entire operation ran more smoothly than ever before. Daniel continued to visit the warehouse regularly, not just to oversee operations, but also to connect with the employees. He made it a point to Learn names, ask about families, and celebrate milestones like birthdays or work anniversaries. These small gestures went a long way in building trust and fostering a sense of community. One Friday afternoon, Daniel called everyone together for a special announcement. The workers gathered outside the warehouse, enjoying the warmth of the spring sun. Laughter filled the air as colleagues chatted casually, their smiles reflecting the positive shift in the workplace. "Thank you all for coming," Daniel began, standing atop a low platform so everyone could see him clearly. "I wanted to take a moment to reflect on how far we've come since I first arrived here undercover." He paused, scanning the faces of the workers. Many nodded in agreement, while others exchanged proud glances. Emily stood near the front, her arms crossed but her expression soft with gratitude. Ryan leaned against a nearby truck, grinning widely. "When I started this journey," Daniel continued, "I had two goals. First, to uncover the truth about what was happening here, and, second, to ensure that every single one of you feels valued and respected. Thanks to your hard work and resilience, we've achieved both and then some." Applause broke out, echoing across the open space. Daniel waited patiently for the noise to subside before continuing. "But this isn't the end. It's just the beginning. Moving forward, I want to make regular visits to all our facilities. Not because I don't trust my managers, but because I believe leadership should always stay connected to the people doing the real work. Your voices matter, and I'm committed to listening." The crowd erupted into cheers once again, with several workers whistling in approval. Greg stepped forward, raising his hand to get Daniel's attention. "Mr. Carter. Daniel." He corrected himself with a chuckle. "Can I say something?" "Of course," Daniel replied, gesturing for him to speak. Greg cleared his throat, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "We've been through a lot here, not just recently, but over the years. There were times when it felt like nobody cared about us. But you proved us wrong. You showed up when we needed you most, and you didn't just fix things, you gave us hope. So on behalf of everyone here, thank you." Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes as the workers erupted into applause once more. He wiped them away quickly, smiling humbly. "I can't take all the credit," he said. "This is your victory as much as mine. Together, we're making SwiftFlow stronger than ever." After the meeting, Emily approached Daniel, holding a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. She handed it to him shyly, her cheeks flushed. "We wanted to give you something," she explained. "It's from all of us." Curious, Daniel unwrapped the box carefully. Inside was a custom-made plaque engraved with the words, "For leading, with heart." "Thank you, Daniel." Beneath the inscription, dozens of signatures covered the surface, each one representing a worker whose life he had touched. "I don't know what to say," Daniel admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "This means the world to me." "You've done so much for us," Emily said softly. "It's the least we could do." Later that evening, as Daniel prepared to leave the warehouse, he took one last look around. The loading dock buzzed with activity. Forklifts moved steadily and workers laughed and joked as they completed their tasks. It was a stark contrast to the tense, oppressive environment he had encountered during his first days undercover. Ryan caught up with him near the parking lot. "Heading out already?" he asked, leaning casually against a stack of pallets. "For now," Daniel replied. "But I'll be back soon. There's still so much to do." Ryan grinned. "Well, don't be a stranger. We kinda like having you around." Daniel chuckled. "I'll keep that in mind." As he climbed into his car and drove away, Daniel reflected on everything he had accomplished and everything that still lay ahead. Going undercover had been a risk, but it had paid off in ways he never imagined. He had uncovered corruption, restored justice, and reignited his passion for leading with integrity. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Change required constant effort, and there would always be challenges to overcome. But Daniel knew one thing, for certain. As long as he stayed connected to the people who made SwiftFlow tick, he could face anything. That night, as he sat in his study reviewing reports and planning future initiatives, Daniel placed the plaque prominently on his desk. It served as a reminder of why he did what he did, to create a company where everyone mattered, where fairness and respect weren't just ideals, but realities. And for the first time in years, Daniel felt truly fulfilled. He wasn't just the CEO of SwiftFlow. He was a leader who inspired trust, loyalty, and hope.